Information, visit theschaefercenter.org.
WSOC TV.
So we got the weather and then
High Country weather.
Fall has definitely arrived.
Fall
Today will
has
be even a
definitely
little bit chillier
arrived.
than it was yesterday, so it'll be in about the mid-50s. As we move through
You're
today,
live on
we say
Facebook
dry
now,
shade tomorrow,
so it's
but
serious
Saturday,
now, Rob.
rain
It's
shades
serious.
return, and the temperatures drop even more. By Monday morning, we're near freezing. We're really starting to feel fall in the air. From Severe Weather Center 9, I'm meteorologist Jacqueline Shearer for High Country Radio.
So during the breaks,
I'm really struggling. And I'm just looking
people will
for
still be
help.
able to see you,
I've had
and
advice
you'll
given
hear
to
us.
me, but it was
But
confusing
you know,
and
we'll
didn't
be able to
really
talk
work.
freely. But
Recovery
I'll
talk.
walk you through. This is our opening right here. So.
I like it. You can call in and talk about your problem.
15 seconds.
And offer solutions. That's what I was looking for. Recovery Talk helped.
Have a problem?
10.
Know someone who does? Call us. 828-262-1567.
5, 4, 3,
This is
2.
Recovery Talk on WATA.
Good morning, everybody. Beautiful fall morning here in the High Country. For those of you that are listening from far off, you should be jealous of us because we woke up all smiling to free AC and bright blue skies. But this is Recovery Talk. Recovery Talk is a show that tries to provide hope and help for the hurting. Recovery Talk is brought to you by our wonderful sponsor, Freedom Auto Tech. Freedom Auto Tech is a local mechanic shop here in town. They're ready to service all your mechanic needs, your car needs. If you have a check engine light on or something rattling somewhere, bring it by and they'll check it out and they'll get it fixed for you. 828-355-4434. That's 828-355-4434. Give them a call. They'll get you on the schedule. And just so you know, money that gets spent there, you're going to get it. You're going to get a good job done with your vehicle. They're going to provide you, if you buy a part from them, a 2-year or 24,000 mile nationwide warranty on that part. That's labor and part, so that's a wonderful warranty. And all the proceeds go to help the Ministry of Freedom Farm Ministries, which is a 1-year recovery program for men here in the High Country. If you are interested in calling in the show, give us a call, 828-262-1567. It's 828-262-1567. This morning, I'm pleased to have my friend Rob, and I can never say your last name right. What's your last name?
Sowards.
Sowards. I want to call you Sowards.
It's been mispronounced.
Or
about
Swords. Or Swords. So anyway, you know what? People have fun with my last name too. So I want to say real quick good morning to Melissa and Patty and Paul and Christy that are joining us on Facebook. And for those of you that are on the air, you know, you could always go to our Facebook page. That's Recovery Talk. Just put it in the search bar and you could watch these shows live. You may not want to, though, because seeing may change your whole perspective on everything. But if you're a Twitterer or a tweeter or whatever you call them.
I think that's it.
Yep, the tweeter.
Yeah.
Okay, Twitterer. You can find the Recovery Talk handle at Recovery Talk 1. So that's at Recovery Talk 1. And you know we're always wanting to hear from our audience. We're always wanting to get feedback. The show was birthed out of just wanting to have an ongoing conversation here because of the problem of addiction, which is ginormous. Okay, I mean, I don't know a better way. My little 3-year-old daughter now says that she has big giga muscles. Okay, so it's a giga problem here in this country. People are dying left and right. If you are 50 years old or younger, the leading cause of death for that demographic is dying from substance abuse. So big problem, and we just want to have a conversation going. And you know, I get to know a lot of people in the recovery industry in the field, and I hear a lot of stories of hope, people that have come from the bondage, and I asked them to come be on the show, and Rob has agreed after a little bit of prodding or a little miscommunication. You know what, for folks listening, I was freaking out because I had talked to Rob Sunday, right? I was like, hey, you want to be on the show? And he's like, yeah, sure. And I was like, great. He said, call me. So I've been calling him, and up until 8:30 last night, he's not responded. I'm like, what is this guy? Is he ducking me? You know, what's going on? So I thought you guys were going to have to suffer with me just kind of coming in here and telling you about me, but by myself, because I didn't think I had a guess. And then I called your buddy. Luckily, us in recovery know the people to call to check on people. So I called your buddy, Clay, who was on the show about a month or so ago.
Yeah.
And he said, I think you have his wrong you got a new number. So thanks again for making sure to carve out some time for us, Rob, and come here and share your story with everybody that's listening and watching. And I've never heard I don't think I've ever heard your detail. I've heard some of it. Yeah, I've heard some of it. But so tell everybody, like, what was life like, man, before getting involved in recovery, or my new word I like to call it is not just recovery but redemption. You know, your whole life changed at one point, but tell us what life was like. What did you grow up in? What were you involved in? Yeah.
My story, probably a lot like a lot of people out there. I grew up in an amazing family in Eastern Kentucky. Great parents, amazing grandparents, was involved in church, was actually an officer in Fellowship of Christian Athletes growing up. Had all the tools needed to succeed. And at 16 years old, playing football, destroyed my knee. During the early 2000s, the initial introduction of Oxycontin, was written Oxycontin at 16 years old for almost 2 solid years.
Whoa.
At that point, I mean, in Eastern Kentucky at the time, it was being billed even on commercials as the non-addictive opioid. It was the new drug. It was going to take care of the opioid addiction, and the doctors at the time truly believed.
Yeah, actually, that's part of a giant lawsuit right now, is the actual document saying that, yeah, this is going to be a great new thing to address chronic pain because it's not addictive, you know? And I think the thrust of that whole argument is they knew they were lying. They absolutely 100% knew they were lying. It was actually the opposite.
Yeah, they not only knew they were lying, but before, from what I gather now, before they even had the pharmaceutical databases, Purdue Pharma put together a database to where they could actually target areas that had high averages of pain prescription. In the Eastern Kentucky being a coal mining area, pain medicine was given out fairly regularly. There were a lot of people that were injured. So Purdue Pharma targeted Eastern Kentucky along with a lot of other communities. And in that, I spent 16 and 17 going into my senior year in high school taking high doses of Oxycontin. Prescribed.
Were parents help monitoring it at all, or they were just like, these are not addictive, just take these?
To a degree, but I mean, at the time, my dad's close friend from high school was my orthopedic surgeon.
Oh.
So, I mean, the surgeon believed that this was non-addictive. This is one of the reasons that he prescribed Oxycontin over what he probably would have normally given a 16-year-old. And in that whole situation, I spent the better part of my early adolescence in high school addicted to Oxycontin. Also had
Let me ask you, did you know you were addicted to it?
Not at the time.
No?
No.
It was just like taking your vitamins.
It was taking the vitamins, but there was also an abuse factor that started there that I didn't recognize at the time.
Okay.
Looking back on it, I was totally abusing the prescription medication I was given. I wasn't taking it as prescribed, especially towards the end. And in that same time frame, I had a pretty catastrophic event. One of the closest people in my life was murdered. 16-year-old girl, real close friend. And in that situation, I learned that I didn't have to deal with a lot of the emotion, a lot of the pain, a lot of the stuff that I didn't know how to handle as a 16, 17-year-old man by staying intoxicated, staying high. And I proceeded to spend the next 16 years, even after they had taken me off of the prescriptions, cold turkey nonetheless, because it was non-addictive. I spent the next 16 years of my life battling that same addiction.
So what was that like being, I'm just curious because I actually don't remember this part of your story, but what was that like being taken off cold turkey by a doctor at that young of an age? Did you go through a withdrawal period?
Immediately into withdrawal. not really knowing exactly what it even was. Just knowing that I was craving something that my body no longer had. And at that time frame, I was not the only young kid on pain medication. And like all of us that have been there know, you network in those environments, and it wasn't hard after being taken off of it legally to find it illegally.
So is that what you did? You got taken off it, and then you started to get it illegally?
Immediately started getting it illegally.
How old were you when that was going on?
17, 18 years old.
Really?
I had 2 knee surgeries. I tore 3 ligaments and a tendon at 16 years old in football. Rehabbed, went back, everything was supposed to be fine. A year and a day later, had the exact same injury occur because of scar tissue healing, things not going back the way they should. Being why I ended up on Oxycontin for 2 years, I actually had my knee reconstructed at 16 and 17. And then following all the rehab at 17 years old, everything's fine. You no longer need pain medicine. But in all actuality, I was as addicted. There was a time frame between the 2 knee surgeries where I was off of pain medicine for a few months.
Okay.
But in that time frame, it doesn't really seem like there were withdrawals, or maybe I just didn't notice it at the time. But it was the beginnings of a tremendous downfall for the next 16, 17 years of my life.
So, surgeries, now having to obtain pain medication illegal, not even 20 years old yet. What did life start to look like for you? I mean, where was the direction? Were you starting to become a pretty functioning addict? Would you say, or what were things like?
That was what I always considered myself, was a functioning addict. I still on the path that I was supposed to be on. I just had this going on in the background. Finished high school, went immediately to college. Did well in college initially. In the midst of the network that I'd created to find what I needed, started selling drugs to finance other aspects of college life. And in that, ended up failing out of school and going immediately to work. I worked for multiple...
How far did you make it in college?
I've gotten enough credits for an associate's, but
Okay.
have actually never finished any type of degree. Have gone back a couple times since then, but it's... In my life, it's always been that same catch-22. We always do well for just a little while. Something happens, we get depressed, and in turn, we end up right back to what we have taught ourselves is the only line of comfort that there is.
We're coming up on a break, but when we come back, you've dropped out of school, you're selling drugs in college, and we'll pick up this story there, all right? Stay with us, we'll be back in a minute. So, okay, it looks like it's adjusted. Camera wasn't working well over there. I don't know what's going on.
I've been having a lot of trouble with Wi-Fi signal and service with Verizon here lately.
Unfortunately, the Wi-Fi here doesn't always, it's not always the best either.
Morning, Aunt Sibby.
I think it craps out more than it actually works.
Morning, Brittany. What's up, Brew Baker? Hey, Mom. Hi, honey. Justin, why aren't you here at work?
I think that's the way you got me the last time. You had Clay on, and I'm supposed to be at work and show up on Facebook.
Well, I mean, Justin works here. I didn't see him in the meeting. Was he here?
I didn't see him.
Well,
They must have wrapped up their meeting earlier. He had an appointment or something.
If you haven't been to Watson Auto Western World, are you or your dear mom and dad 62 years or older, 45 years or older?
It's cool today. Hey, more. What's up, Mike? Paul, that was for my wife. Yes, I call my wife honey. You're doing great, man. We go to about 11:30, so that's why when you said, like, you know, that was the next 16 years of life, I wanted to camp kind of like, we'll tell a little bit more of that 16 years, because you don't want to rush to the end and be like,
Now we got 45 minutes to get.
So
with a dream of opening a small bagel restaurant in a small town.
and don't think of it as like you're glorifying your past, man. I know that for me is a struggle, but you know, you don't know who's listening, man. And, you know, there's details about, like, you know, I understand this guy got help, but you know, my son or daughter has gone this far, and you know, sharing some of that where you were is really helpful sometimes, you know. So
That's one of the things that we've always talked about is I don't think you can truly relate unless you walk that road.
yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of amazing counselors out there that
There's so much truth to that. Like I've learned. I've gone from left to right as far as extremes, and when it comes to recovery and my opinions about it. And now to use you know who John Lachelle is at church? He has recently told me when he was talking about some doctrine. And I went, but I've always thought about this, and he explained this to me, and he's like, you know, Jim, you're going to have to start learning to live in the tension sometimes. You're not going to have it all figured out sometimes, and like that's just rattling. And last year or so, that's been the seasons where I don't like to come down hard. I agree with you. I would say, like, I have never really been around somebody that could really be a powerful counselor in addiction that did not come from it themselves, and I can see that, but I don't want to like take them all out of the loop saying they can never be like that, you know. I would think that maybe running a place, though, you have to.
there's no way you can have the amount of patience that's needed unless
30 seconds, y'all.
I mean, most of the conversations I have with people at church and whatnot, they're like, how do you deal with like getting close to these guys and then them going off the rails again? And it's like, look, you got to understand, it wasn't fruitless what you did, you know.
10
It's
seconds.
part of it, you know.
5, 4, 3, 2.
Well, we're back with Recovery Talk, so I got a little tongue-tied right there. Recovery Talk is hope and help for the hurting, and you can call 828-262-1567 if you got a question for me or Rob. I don't think the oldest 25-year-old in the room is fielding any questions today, so maybe. But 828-262-1567. If you're watching on Facebook, our good friend Todd is always putting it up there. Shout out to Freedom Auto Tech, who is the official show sponsor. Freedom Auto Tech is ready to service all of your vehicle needs. Bring it in there. Call them, make an appointment. If your engine light's on, you need an oil change, you need tires, whatever. They're ready to help you out. 828-355-4434. The number is 828-355-4434. And you know, if you buy a part, that part comes with a 24,000 or 2-year warranty. That's parts and labor if something happens, and you can feel like you're really helping out a recovery ministry here in the High Country by taking your car there, because all the profits go to Freedom Farm Ministries. So give them a call if you need to get your car looked at. Rob, so were you a Wildcat? College?
No, I actually went to Eastern Kentucky University.
Okay, well,
but I definitely
there's some
believe
people
blue.
there's some people here that listen. I'm good friends with that we kind of go back and forth. But anyway, so you started college, you made it to about so you dropped out, you kind of gone back, you selling drugs at this point to fund your habit. I think that's almost a necessity to have an opiate pain medication. Was it strictly pain medication still?
At that point in my life, it was still prescription medication.
Those things are stinking expensive, and they get more expensive all the time. So you have to do something in order continue to maintain, and the tolerance level on pain medications. People may not know this, but see, the difference between pain medication, this is my opinion, pain medication and like street heroin is that pain medication, you know exactly how much you're going to put in your body every single time. So you know how much you can push it to, because you start to get a tolerance, so you know you can up it of half a pill or a whole pill. And it creates this, I think, this rise on your tolerance level much faster, in my opinion, when it comes to dealing with pain medication. So it becomes much more expensive. Whereas street heroin,
you never know.
You never know. You know, it's like you get a very strong batch and get a very weak batch, and if you mess around, you're overdosing. So there's a lot more, Russian roulette per se when it comes to street heroin. So pain medication, in my experience, personally, and with friends, you get a much higher tolerance, much larger habit quicker because you know how much you're pushing. So anyway,
also a false sense of security.
Yeah,
in that sense, most people that use heroin, which is in all honesty where my addiction ended up, but you're somewhat careful when you're using heroin because there is that level of unknown. One of the reasons.
Isn't that weird to say? Heroin, guys injecting street heroin into their veins. Somewhat careful.
As careful, I guess, as you can be in that environment. But it's one of the reasons I stuck with pharmaceuticals as long as I did. I knew what I was getting. I knew it was clean, and for the longest time, that was the only thing I would do.
My friend Paul down in Georgia, who's one of us, he says it's called the ceiling effect. I never heard that before, but it's called the ceiling effect. Yeah, makes sense.
That does make sense, and that's just like you were explaining. That's my tolerance level consistently rose. Mm-hmm. There was no ceiling to that as far as the level went itself. Doing enough opioids to literally kill multiple normal individuals.
And, the first time in my life I tried what they call blues or Roxy 30s, Perk 30s, whatever you want to call them. First time I ever tried one, I did half of one, and within 30 minutes I was
violently ill.
I was throwing up because it was so strong. At the height of my addiction, I could do 4 at a time, and it wasn't a big deal, so.
Well, that's being initially started out on Oxycontin. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was receiving 40 milligrams of Oxycontin at 16 years old. And towards the peak of probably my tolerance, it was no crazy feat to do 400 or 500 milligrams in a day.
Yeah.
And
amazing.
Stuff that...
But it's not addictive.
No, not
Thank
at all.
God it's not addictive. Thank you, Purdue, for that information.
But that's, and I still can even look back and see that commercial in my head. Because, they plastered Eastern Kentucky airwaves with it back in mid-90s as far as Oxycontin, a non-addictive opioid. And it's amazing to me that this is where we are now. Because this is where this all started.
Yeah.
We were freely given, as a nation, a tremendous amount of opioids, and there was no regulation. And then, we've got a problem, let's regulate it to the max.
Yep.
And now everyone's turned to the street.
Exactly.
And now the heroin outbreak that everybody's seeing, something that used to be in the shadows, something you never heard about really, even in the drug lifestyle we lived in, heroin was almost taboo.
Right.
And now
they're giving middle school teachers Narcan to take with them in the classroom. So
how
that's
far
where we're at now.
And that's, Danny, who's been on the show, and I just traveling over North Carolina and seeing what's going on in Wilmington and Jacksonville, all along the coast. I've always seen the effects of the opioid epidemic in Eastern Kentucky. It's been going on for 30 years there.
Right.
But it's been centralized, and it's not been to the extent that it is now. And the overdose rate is astronomical.
So, so still using pain pills. Let's move on with your. Where are we at now in your timeline? And for those of you guys on Facebook, Todd has put up a article or or something to find the ceiling effect. Probably an article about the ceiling effect. So sorry, go ahead.
Dropping out of college, realizing that not only did I like the addiction at this point, but I also liked the lifestyle that came along with it.
There you
go. Big money, no real set schedule, could do what I wanted when I wanted. Selling drugs that I wouldn't use, so I didn't even have to worry about the temptation of what I had in my own possession. And that progressed for quite a long time, to the point to where I started working but was still always selling drugs, trafficking drugs across the country. Was blessed with good opportunities. I worked natural gas for a considerable amount of time, up in the northern part of the country in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And part of that was still my mentality of being a functioning addict. I paid all my bills, I took care of my responsibilities, but I had a $1,000 a week habit. Nobody could tell me I had a problem because
you paid your bills.
I paid my bills.
Right. And you showed up at work.
And I showed up every day, did what I was supposed to do, and my addiction being that skeleton in the closet that nobody really knew about.
Well, at least you think nobody knows really about. But
yeah,
most people.
We always convince ourselves that nobody can see what's going on,
right,
but everybody sees. And through that time frame, continued to allow my addiction to get worse. And in that was also when I was up north, working out of northern Pennsylvania. That's where I ran into the issue with the pharmaceuticals. It was the first time I had ever bought pharmaceuticals off the street that were not what they appeared to be. I was unaware at that time that you can actually buy pill presses. You can make your own pills.
So you bought some bunk pills?
I bought some pills that
too
were
strong.
Well, they were actually a bad batch of ecstasy. What I thought was 30 milligram Roxy's was actually something that they couldn't even sell as what it was intended to be because it was no good. In doing those pills and almost ending up in the hospital, I at that point lost my faith in these are what they say they are. These I don't ever have to worry about what I'm getting.
All right, we're coming up on another break, but we're at kind of some big changes happening in your story, and when we come back, we'll pick it up from there. But stay with us. We'll be back here in just a minute.
Station AM 1450 and 96.5 FM WATA. Boom. Through sunset on Sunday in honor of North Carolina Highway.
Every time.
Every time.
I hate this computer.
You want me to show you how to do it?
Yeah, man, go for it.
Hey, Rich. Hey, Amanda. Scott.
I remember those, painkillers, though. The stuff that you were talking about, like the amount of surgeries I had. My parents were like, no, it's not gonna do it. I'm like, why? It's gonna tear your stomach up. That's what they would say. A lot of Tylenol it is.
You have good parents.
Yes.
Yes. The amount of times, like,
You could be in a whole different state right now.
both literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
Woman who shot and killed late Wednesday night in East Charlotte, according to Charlotte-Mecklenburg police. This investigator tells Fox 46 News.
Someone knows what happened to this young lady, and it'll be a slow process. We've got our crime scene van out here, and they'll begin working kind of outwards in, looking for any evidence they can find.
President Trump intends to withdraw from the 144-year-old Universal Postal Union Treaty that sets fees National Postal Service's charge for delivering mail in small packages to nations worldwide. China is among the nations receiving lower rates since 1969, along with poor developing countries. Retail analyst Bert Flickinger says it's time for a change, but
short-term pain in terms of price, longer-term gain in terms of leveling the playing field worldwide in terms of cost.
And the Asheville City Council has voted to name Deborah D. Campbell as the city's next city manager.
Are you on? There you go. You can watch us.
News.
You can watch anybody that says anything. It's just a little bit of a lag, so you'll be seeing
Comments after the fact. Or,
hey, Rob's watching. So we got like 2 good bits left. So we got like one more, and then a break, and then the final, right? Yeah.
from the past, and then I guess into the recovery story or something along those lines.
Yeah. That's your voice, right?
Yeah,
Voiceover?
100%. That's what I sound when I actually wake up in the morning. This is all a facade.
Yeah. Hey, buddy.
Some North Carolina firefighters who rescued dozens after Hurricane Florence need help of their own.
Volunteers with the Northeast Fire Department in Duplin County, North Carolina, including Clayton Bryant, are in a bad way after Hurricane Florence hit nearly 5 weeks ago.
90% of the firefighters lost everything they own. Yet they've been here when they can.
The department, which lost its building and 1 truck in the flooding from the hurricane.
The last guy that I had in here for, did you see that show by any chance? Kid that's he works in a lab here at ASU. He's like studying like how cancer metastasizes in the body, and he's gotten like super excited and in recovery because he's affected. He doesn't. He's the oldest 26-year-old I've ever met.
Trying to get there.
Yeah. But yeah, man, he wants to in 5 years. He's like talking to investors and everything to like get people off their medications, but like he like do it right, you know. Start a facility down in Wilkes County, and he's a 100% believer. He's like, look, get these people off all these medications that they're on, and then get them into a proper place, but like make it seamless. Don't like any gaps of time. He's like, that's one of the worst things. Like you go to a place, he says they give you Suboxone, and then they say go to this place and get this help, and he's like, and they never go to that place. So,
and that time frame is where you'll see a tremendous amount of overdose increases. People who think they can jump back into what they were doing 30 or 60, especially in the opioid side of it, your tolerance immediately falls.
WSOC TV's Air Weather Center.
All right, so we got 30 seconds.
Fall has definitely arrived.
Fall
Today
has
will be
definitely
a little
arrived.
bit chillier than it was yesterday. So it'll be in about the mid.
It's like I think I was one of those people seeing how long I could freeze before I turned the heat on.
Yeah.
I'm still holding off on turning on the heat.
I had mercy on my wife this morning. I was like, here you go.
All right, 10 seconds.
I'm meteorologist Jacqueline Shearer for High Country Radio.
5, 4, 3,
AM
2.
1450 and 96.5 FM.
Welcome back to Recovery Talk. Hope and help for the hurting. 828-262-1567 is the number to call if you'd like to say hi to Rob or ask him a question, or me or Mike. He said he's fielding questions today. Yep. That's 828-262-1567. And Freedom Auto Tech, they are the official sponsor of this show, and they are ready to deal with any of your car problems. They want to help fix it. 828-355-4434 is their number. That's 828-355-4434. Give them a call if you have a car problem. Know that parts and labor are covered for any part you purchase from them for 24,000 miles or 2 years. And all the proceeds from the shop go to help support the Ministry of Freedom Farm, which is a 1-year recovery program for men. Rob, so you, in your story, have brought us to the point to where you're now no longer trusting pharmaceuticals on the streets because you got a really bad batch, almost ended up in the hospital.
That's the time frame in my life where heroin became I finally made that decision. Well, if I can't trust what I'm buying on the street as pharmaceutical grade, then what does it matter?
Right.
Started into...
How old were you about this time?
This was around 2012, so right around 30, 31 years old.
Okay.
This is the heroin introduction is where everything in my story began to fall apart.
Yeah.
Heroin being stronger, being cheaper, my tolerance continued to grow. Ended up right around, I believe it was October this time of year in 2012, wrecking and breaking my neck and could no longer work. Still using, still $1,000 a week habit and no way to support that habit. Still trying to traffic drugs, but now no vehicle, broken neck, broken wrist, no real way to freely travel for a little while. And in that started the next aspect of losing myself. Grew up with a strong sense of morals, like I said initially, but started stealing from family members, from friends, anywhere that I could obtain the money to fulfill the habit that I still had. Still not even realizing how bad my problem was.
Mm-hmm.
Got to the point to where between the trafficking and stealing, breaking and entering, all the stuff that was involved in that lifestyle at that point, I got arrested right around November of 2012 and was looking at 60 years in prison.
60?
I caught 8 felony charges at one time. The way they look at that in Kentucky is it's the same as basically a 3-strike rule. You've got 8 felonies, you're a persistent felony offender, we're going to treat you as such.
Even though it's all one offense, they could just separate all those felonies. Okay.
I had a DUI about 10 years prior, and that was the only charge on my record. I'd never really been in any kind of trouble, but at one point, catch 8 felonies, they're looking at trying to boxcar 3 20-year sentences together. Basically, I would have, if convicted, would have ended up spending 85% of 60 years in prison. And that's where my eyes started to open.
Mm-hmm.
Realized at that point I had an issue, still was lying to myself. Still telling myself the same things the doctors had told me for years. You'll always have to have pain medicine.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't need to be injecting heroin into my veins, but I'll always have to have pain medicine.
Yeah.
And just one of the great lies that we like to, as addicts, tell ourselves. We're not.
And it's easy to believe. Maybe Todd can find the Cleveland Clinic article. I think he's probably posted it before, Todd. But there is an article I passed around to friends. It's saved in my thing, but it's a whole article about treating chronic pain with pain medication. And they said, like, they go through the argument that, like, look, pain medication needs to be, like, way down, like, one of the last resorts to treating chronic pain before you exhaust all these other things, like physical therapy, if you're overweight, losing weight, changing diet, things that help inflame, your body, and, detoxing, all that stuff. But then ultimately pain medication, chronic pain medication, taking pain medication to treat chronic pain ends up causing more pain in your body.
Well, that's one of the things that actually amazed me was, for anyone that has been through an opiate withdrawal, the pain that's associated with that. I mean, you read articles and it talks flu-like symptoms, but the physical pain that comes along with removing that opioid from your system is excruciating.
In my opinion on that, I think it just your body just becomes ultimately super sensitive to all kinds of pain that it wasn't as sensitive to before, because you've been numbing yourself for so long.
Well, there's actually an article too that I've read, and I think the University of Kentucky is doing research on, that your body produces a synthetic opioid, a receptor, a chemical that fits into the same receptor that deals with pain to a degree. One of the things that allows people to deal with a great shock of pain initially, and then it gets worse as it goes on. It's the adrenaline effect, but in that, just like any other foreign substance that you introduce into your body, that your body makes naturally, your body quits making it.
Right.
So, and it takes time for your body to recoup after the effect.
Kind of like people that inject testosterone and stuff like that in order to gain muscle. Your body stops making its own testosterone, so you're dependent on what you're injecting in your body, and you know, it's kind of the same thing. So, and when you stop taking the testosterone, then
your body takes weeks, if not months, or
right.
if it's long-term abuse, it may never come back.
Right.
In the same way with opioid addiction, every time I would quit, what the doctors had told me rang louder. You'll always need pain medicine.
There he is, Todd, with the Cleveland Clinic article, right on the spot. So, facing 60 years.
Facing 60 years, finally hitting a spot. Like I said initially, I had great parents. Came to see me in jail and let me know that that's where I'd be staying until I could find some sort of treatment.
Right.
Actually, at this point, I had already applied, before going to jail, had applied to Hebron Colony and been accepted and was on their waiting list. I still had multiple months before my entrance date, and my parents, who very easily could have gotten me out of jail, said,
"You'll stay in until your date shows up."
And
for those of you guys that are listening and watching, Hebron Colony is another local recovery ministry here in the High Country. It's a Christian faith-based place, but it's Freedom Farm is like a year-long commitment. Hebron is 10 weeks.
10 weeks, 70 days.
They do something just different, you know, but it's another program. So.
And in that same time frame, I mean, I'm furious with my parents. But I look back at that hard line that they drew as what truly saved my life. Had I been able to walk away from jail at that time, I would have gone directly back into my addiction.
The common thing we talk about here, another example of proper tough love, okay? They didn't cut you off. They loved you, told you they loved you, said that we're doing this because we love you. But they never kind of like, their tough love wasn't like, well, just let him figure it out by himself and sit and rot. It was, hey, what is the plan to best help our son, which was, as tough as it was, let him sit in there in that jail in order for him to go to this place. So,
and I thank my parents to this day for that hard line that they drew, because I know myself well enough to know that at that time in my life, I would have been right back out there and probably wouldn't have survived.
Yeah.
So I sat in jail for a considerable amount of time. I did get out before my entrance date into Hebron, but my entrance date moved up. It was one of those things that I look back as truly God putting his hand on the situation. But in that time frame, I came into Hebron March 6th or March 8th of 2013. Still with the same mentality. I've got a problem. I don't need to be injecting heroin, but I'll always need pain medication. But I gotta get control over this.
Right.
This is a point in my life where I went from being an officer in Fellowship of Christian Athletes and being raised in church to where I no longer believed in God.
Okay.
The darkness, the 16 years of my life that I lived in addiction and the things that I saw, I completely turned my back. The friend that I lost at 16, I never could understand that. And it was one of those times in my life that I wish somebody in the church had come alongside me. In that time frame, instead of me deciding or finding out on my own that I could somewhat mute those feelings with addiction.
It's one of the biggest arguments with atheists, you know, when it comes to just God in general. You know, how could there be a God when there's this much pain and suffering in the world? So
I always liked Albert Einstein's answer to that question. He was asked as a child in school, how can so much evil exist if God is real? And Albert Einstein answered by saying, does cold exist, or is it the absence of heat? And in that, does God exist, or does evil exist, or is it the absence of God?
Also, the guy that coined the famous addicts term for insanity, doing the same thing and expecting different results. We're coming up on a break, but you're in Hebron Colony when we come back. and we'll pick up the story from there, and we'll finish it up. Stay with us.
Season is upon us, and our staff at Boone Drug wants to make sure
Brennan.
you and your family are protected this season. The flu vaccine is offered at Boone Drug at Deerfield, Boone Drug at King Street, and Boone Drug at Newmarket.
All right, so we
accept
got-
Hey, Uncle Willie.
insurances such as Medicare, Blue Cross Blue
About a
Shield,
2-minute
and many
break.
others.
Okay.
It's our privilege to help keep your
And then we
family
finish it
protected
out from
this
there,
flu
buddy.
season.
Great.
Stores for more
Perfect.
information. Please protect yourselves and the ones you love.
That's one of the reasons I laugh.
Hi, I'm Jerry.
Maybe shouldn't say this on Facebook. It was Clay, because he was a little bit nervous coming in. Like, how many times have we given our testimony in front of hundreds, if not thousands?
He did a
of
great
people?
job too.
I see
Yeah.
illustration Travis Critcher, who's running for Watauga.
I mean, to me, it's the greatest gift God's given me, the ability to.
I mean, you have a fantastic host that helps guide you through your stories. So.
Agreed.
Just kidding.
We know your mom will agree.
It's amazing how humble I am too.
I'm Coach Jerry Moore,
Absolutely.
and I know we can count on Critcher.
Paid for by Critcher for Clerk.
Take off your shoes, your socks, sneakers and sandals, those high heels, flip-flops. There's no
Yeah, these commercials are getting ridiculous, man. Can you hear this one?
There's just some commercials when I'm doing my show. I'm like, all right, turn everything off, and I'm literally just watching the clock. Like, okay, spot's over.
Is this someone that works here?
I don't know.
We're the same one that does the Goober Peas ad.
No, the Goober Peas people, they actually are from, like, the Goober Peas people. Like, they came in and recorded that.
The worst commercials I've ever heard here in High Country were the old ones for Capone's Pizza. They had the old Chicago gangster.
Yeah.
Those were the worst commercials I'd ever heard in my life.
They should have just got Mike Kelly to voice them.
Yeah.
All right, 8 seconds go.
We're back. Recovery Talk, Hope and Help for the Hurting. 828-262-1567 is the number to call if you want to call in to Rob or myself or Mike, who is fielding questions today. 828-262-1567. Check us out on Facebook, Recovery Talk. If you caught a little bit of the show, you can go back and watch it. We post the shows. You can go back in the archives and watch any show that we've done up to this point. Hours of thrilling entertainment. So, Freedom Auto Tech is our official sponsor, and Freedom Auto Tech is a local mechanic shop ready to service your car if it needs servicing. So 828-355-4434. That's 828-355-4434. And all the proceeds profits go to support recovery ministry here in the High Country through Freedom Farm Ministries. Recovery Talk 1, that's at Recovery Talk 1 is our Twitter handler. I think that's all my social media advertisement. So you have made it to Hebron Colony. You still have this mentality you'll have to take pain medication the rest of your life, at least some kind of pain medication. So what happened, man?
The amazing thing in that is even having that mentality, pulling onto the mountain there at Hebron, I had a sense of peace that I hadn't experienced in decades. Didn't understand it, didn't know where it came from, but knew it was where I was supposed to be. And of course, like any of us that have tried treatment, been through treatment, the first few days, it's always that awkward, trying
Absolutely.
to fill your environment out. And but I made a couple good buddies over the first little bit, and we came out of chapel one morning, just a normal morning, nothing amazing going on in my mind. And one of my buddies looks at me and said, "Man, I was sitting there in chapel looking at the 10 Commandments up on the walls, trying to figure out how many I'd broken." And it was a question I'd never thought about. It was something I'd never tried to answer. And I stood there in that moment, and 9 of them, I mean, just no question, racked off. And the only one in my mind that I was even struggling with was murder. And in that moment, God convicted me harder than I've ever been. You've sold drugs to people that have lost their lives. You've wished this upon people. You've been involved in situations where you don't know what the outcome was. And it broke me. I realized in that moment that not only had I broken every commandment God had given me, but I'd done it willfully, shaking my fist at him. And very, very humbling, very, very life altering moment in my life, and spent the rest of that day crying out to God and turned my life back over to Him. We won't get into the whole once saved, always saved question, but to me, there's no question in that moment that God became the main driving force in my life.
The Lord of your life.
The Lord of my life.
Okay.
Spent the next 8 weeks or so in the program, just diving into the Word of God, trying to answer all these questions. I come from a mindset of scientific and analytical backgrounds, and I question everything. So all these questions that occurred during my time frame of disbelief, now I'm trying to answer from the standpoint of God's Word, and just digging. That's Danny and my relationship started there. Mm-hmm. We would spend hours a day and some nights till dawn, just digging through God's Word. And through that time frame, if you'd have told me day one going into Hebron that I would have been there the full 70 days, I would have called you a liar. Mm-hmm. Let alone ask for an extension and stay an additional 12 weeks. And then asked to be asked to be a staff member for a year as a volunteer, and almost 3 years as a paid staff member, managing the thrift store there for the ministry. Never would I have imagined that was the turn that my life would have taken. But the blessings that God has bestowed just in being able to work with other men, seeing His miracles happen in front of me. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of people go through an entire life dying to see one of God's miracles, and I mean, it's almost, I almost feel greedy at times seeing how often God works in men and women's lives who finally are completely broken and crying out.
I'm a pretty analytical person myself, and I, probably altogether, so we're looking at 14 years, in recovery, not consistent. There was a 6 and an 8. There was a 5-year bad period in between them, but heavily. You hear all these people say these things, and like I would refuse to believe them. And one of them was, during your first year, make a list of what you want your life to look like in 5 years. And they used to always say, and you'll shortchange yourself, and you'll be amazed 5 years later, or how much different your life is, and unexpected, and how great it is. And I used to be like, shut up, come on, it's really not that great. Come on, And yeah, they were right. That was nothing like I would have put on that. I didn't do the list. Okay, I'll just be honest. I didn't do the list, but I know what I would have put on that list, and it would have been nothing like it is today. And you sounds like you experienced the same thing.
The same thing. I'm approaching 5 years of sobriety this March, and
maybe I need to make amends to all those people I resented for saying that for so long.
But you just absolutely can't picture the difference that making God the Lord of your life, having a true relationship with Christ, can make in a recovery process and in life in general. I mean, I spent so many years striving to find myself when all along God was saying, right here it is. When do you want to come?
So we're coming down to the last about 4 minutes. So did you discover you didn't need pain medication for chronic?
That's another one of those things that Danny and I kind of clicked and related on. I went in, like I said, with that mentality, but...
Oh, we got a phone call. This is Recovery Talk. Hello? Hi. It is Jim. Hi, Barbara. How are you? Barbara, thanks so much for the call. And Rob heard you say that too, and so did Mike. So we really appreciate it, Barbara. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Barbara. Bye. Rob, we got a phone call.
Good deal.
Yeah, we don't get much of those. So Barbara, you
I've
probably
read some of her comments.
Yeah, she's awesome, and she struggles because she has family that struggles, and she has been a big supporter of recovery up here in the high country. So we love Barbara, and we're praying for Corky, her husband, who's being treated for cancer. So our prayers are with him. Sorry. So anyway, pain medication.
That was another one of those places Danny and I kind of clicked, and our relationship grew. Danny was one of those people that had way more physical ailments, injuries, breaking bones, getting run over by vehicles, and for him to walk around without pain medication and deal with that, it actually changed my mindset. If this man can do it 30 years my senior, then
watching Danny walk will make you hurt.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in all that was the first time in my adult life where I truly thought maybe there is something to the fact that I don't really need this. And over the last 5 years, my pain level is almost non-existent. I deal with some migraines and some issues from where I broke my neck back in 2012, but it's all things that honestly can be handled with sleep more than more than anything.
Just getting out and walking, So we're getting close to the bottom. You probably could go on for more. I probably stalled you in the other part. The beginning part of your story. But Rob, I want to say thank you so much for coming in. You couldn't hear the call in because it's just a technical thing, but it was a local person calling in just thanking us for the show. They weren't asking any questions beyond how they could watch the previous shows on social media, which can be done on Recovery Talk. Search for that on Facebook, or you can actually go to the Freedom Farm Ministries website, freedomfarmministries.org, and you can watch all of our shows. But Rob, man, thanks so much. Rob is still in the recovery community up here, still doing what he can. He had stuff he could tell you about being part of Celebrate Recovery, being part of Saul to Paul Ministries, and maybe we'll have to have you on again. But hey, look, anybody listening or watching, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask Rob, I can contact us through any of the avenues that we've given you, and we can definitely pass on that stuff to Rob. So, Rob, thanks so much for coming here, man, and
appreciate y'all
being with us. We'll see you next week, everyone.
Roland Pump, a family-run business with over 50
Good job, man.
also specializes in well water treatment. Like systems and soft pieces.
I had a thought mid-show.